Would you like to find sexual satisfaction and sexual purity at the same time? Would you be surprised to know that the common knowledge that men and women think, act, feel, communicate, approach life differently is a direct link to our ability to find sexual satisfaction and sexual purity? I believe that this link that I'm going to detail out for you is going to be very helpful for our society, and I encourage you, if you listen to this and agree that that's the case, please share this with somebody else and help us on the journey to find sexual purity and sexual satisfaction. This is a review of Sunday's message, so if you did not see that message, this is a summary of it. If you would like all the scripture references and more lengthier details to reference on our channel or on our Facebook page, the service for May the 2nd of this year. But men and women, we're different, and this is a big reason why we struggle to find sexual purity and sexual satisfaction. Particularly, let's start with sexual purity, and let's start with men first. Because really what it is being able to understand what's happening in us and the other person. So let's start with men. Men, one thing that we need to keep in mind is we tend to approach our sexual frustrations with it's her fault. You know, if they wouldn't dress that way, if they wouldn't look that way, if they wouldn't behave, talk that way, if my wife would be more available, then this wouldn't be a problem. And that's where we kind of sit. And here's something we need to consider biblically. One is in 1 Corinthians 7:5, it states specifically that the reason why we give into temptation is because of our lack of self-control. It's not because of women, it's because we lack self-control. That's why we cross the line. Secondly, James chapter 1 verse 14 says that we are lured by our own desire. So it's whether the woman that's in personally there or there's a woman across the screen, no matter what it is, if we cross a line, it has nothing to do with the woman on the other side. It has everything to do with we lack self-control and we have passion inside of us. We already desired that. The temptation is just what made it become visible. And so we have to own that and recognize that the reason why we are struggling is not because of our context, but because of what's inside of us. And if we begin to take responsibility for our own actions, we might discover ourselves being pure before others and before God. So taking that principle in mind, we want to walk through 7 considerations as far as the way women think and what we are thinking that they are doing. One is that women attempt to look good. They dress a certain way, they do themselves up a certain way so that they are appealing, so that they are attractive. And men, we need to know that the reason why they do that isn't to lure you to them. It isn't to tempt you to lust. They are doing that because it feels good to look good. That's why they're doing that. And if we can understand that, then some of our animosity, bitterness, and some of our justification of our actions might go away. Secondly, when they attempt to look good, when ladies attempt to look good, it is not to attract specifically you. So it might be to attract a specific person, but that doesn't mean that they're looking to attract every single man. So we need to keep that in mind when we come across a beautiful woman. Thirdly, they might not have a specific man in mind, but that still doesn't mean that they're looking to attract you. Just like you don't find every woman attractive, the same is true for that beautiful woman that you're looking at. Just because she dressed herself up to look beautiful doesn't mean she's after you. Again, keeping this in mind will help us not to justify our actions. 4, a woman being nice to me or smiling at me does not mean she's hitting on me. It might just mean she's being nice. And again, I'm going to save myself a lot of frustration if I understand that reality. Some of this will also be insightful for women to know how men are perceiving them. 5, immodesty. Just because I can see the form of a woman does not mean she's dressed in an immodest way. And face it, guys, many of the reasons why, or many of us do not need a lot of help in our imagination sexually in our minds. And so we really can't always point the finger at women when it comes to the way that they are dressing. 6, posture. Just because a woman is in a certain posture that we take to be provocative doesn't mean that they are actually attempting to be provocative. Keep in mind that often when we take a woman as behaving in a provocative way, sex is not even entering their mind. And again, if we understand this, it'll help us to know how to approach women to begin with. It'll also help us to save ourselves a lot of frustration. 7th is that, particularly if you're married, when your wife chooses to not be available to you, this does not mean that she doesn't love you, that she doesn't care about your desires, your struggles, that she's not interested or doesn't desire you, or that she will never want sex again. And men, when you're at your lowest point, sometimes you feel that way when your wife says no, but understand that that's not what's happening on the other side of that relationship. And again, the more we understand this, the more we'll stop justifying our actions, and we won't fall into temptation, we won't find ourselves in frustration, and we won't justify our actions. These are things that will help. It'll also help us know how to communicate to women and potentially work towards, again, sexual satisfaction. So that's for men. Now for the ladies, some things to keep in mind. Again, like I said on Sunday, these things do not mean that the sin of a man is the fault of a woman. I want to make sure that's abundantly clear. A man choosing to sin, and I think I made that clear when I spoke to men here. When a man chooses to sin, that is on him. It is not on the woman. However, there are a couple of things to keep in mind as far as biblical principles. 1 Peter chapter 3, the first 6 verses, Peter instructs women to dress or to appear in a modest way. Somewhat is referring to dress. A lot of it's referring to jewelry and potentially makeup. Just you can see the overall attention is towards the woman's effort to make herself look beautiful. And Peter says that a woman should be careful focusing on accomplishing an attractiveness in her appearance. Now, why would that be a concern? We can see in that passage, and we can, as we move to Romans 14, we can consider that a big part of that is because of what's on the other side, because of the way a man thinks a woman should be considerate. Well, why should a woman care about or dress a certain way, behave a certain way, act a certain way, just to help a man not give into temptation? Well, that's precisely what Romans 14 teaches. Romans 14 tells us that though we have various freedoms, so a woman has a freedom to dress however she wants to dress, move her body however she wants to move her body, interact with others however she wants to interact with others. But if a woman dresses, behaves, interacts with others in a way that ends up tempting someone to sin, and she is not taking that into consideration, then she is not acting in love. Now, that does not mean that we're coming to specific conclusions like what specifically can a woman wear and not wear, what are specific ways a woman can and can't move her body, what are specific ways that women can and can't interact with others. The outcome is not as much of a concern as the way a woman should go about making those decisions. And that is a woman, when she's getting ready to dress, when she's going to move her body a certain way, when she's going to interact with a man, a woman, because Romans 14 says, again, if we take those liberties without considering how it affects other people, we are not walking in love. So a woman who is walking in the love of Christ will consider how this will affect the men around her, her dress, her body movements, and her interactions. A woman will take those things in consideration, one who is acting in love. So again, not saying that it's the fault of the woman that a man sins. However, it is unloving for a woman not to keep these things in mind. So what are the 7 items for women that would be helpful for them to know how to interact with men in a way that promotes purity? 1, considering their posture. Again, a woman often doesn't think sexually when she moves her body. Again, it doesn't mean she does not, but often when a man takes her as being provocative, she's not being provocative. So how's she supposed to help that? Some of it is just starting to think like a man. Maybe listen to guys, maybe listen to your husband, talk to him, ask him questions, or even sometimes we can pick it up from sitcoms or movies. We can pick up kind of the way men think, so that we can recognize that, okay, when I posture myself this way, that is a provocative posture for a man. It's not for me, but it is for a man. Secondly, attractiveness. Some women, and this is not to say you're not attractive, this is to say that some women perceive themselves as not being attractive, and then stop considering this because they think, well, I'm not attractive, so I don't need to worry about this. Well, everyone's pretty much attractive to somebody. All of us have different preferences as far as what we find to be attractive. All of us find different things that we perceive to be attractive. We have different opinions or taste. But also men, the more they are without sex, the more they tend to lower their standards. So odds are all of you ladies are attractive to somebody. So don't let that be a reason to not make this a consideration for your life. Third, men desiring to have sex with a beautiful woman. Men noticing beautiful women and noticing they are sexually attractive. Men seeking a sexual relationship, specifically within a marriage. All of those things are not a perversion of the way God made them. God made men, he made women too, but he made men to desire and crave sex with a beautiful woman. And apart from crossing sin lines, that is not a perversion. 4, a man who has a wife who is frequently and desiring to do so is sexually active with her husband will seldomly find her husband tempted sexually because of that context. Again, that doesn't mean it's the wife's fault that he sins. However, a wife can certainly be of great help to her husband in his pursuit of sexual purity, asking for them to do it in love, not in responsibility for their sins. I hope that we get the difference between those two. 5, ask yourself this question when you're considering the dress of a woman and the behavior of a man. Knowing how a man is wired, how much should a man be able to see before he is tempted to action? How much is he expected to see before he is tempted to action? These are things that might motivate us to be more compassionate to the men in our lives. 6, keep in mind, again, what will promote compassion for ladies towards men is that the context that men sit in is they are, by our culture, constantly begged to jump into sexuality, constantly asked, want it, desire it, crave it, constantly using a man's sex drive to sell things, all kinds of things that's constantly there in front of a man. And then the moment a man shows the slightest interest in sex, he is instantly scalded for it. And this is where a man sits. And again, doesn't mean a man should cross sin lines. Doesn't mean a woman's responsible for a man's actions. However, it does mean that maybe in a loving, Christ-like way, women should feel compassionate towards where men are coming from. 7, consider, ladies, the mixed signals that you send to men. You do not want men to treat you like a piece of meat. However, you do dress yourself up to put yourself on display. Again, I get it. Your intention isn't to attract a man. Your attention isn't in that place. But know that you are attempting to look appealing physically and then getting upset because someone approaches you because you are appealing physically. So these are things that we want to keep in mind as we're facing this fight. And I believe that if we understand each other We might know how to communicate to one another in order to get our needs fulfilled. We may be able to understand each other enough so that we are not justifying our sin actions, and we might find both sexual satisfaction and sexual purity. I encourage you, please share this with somebody else. If you have any questions about this, I'd love to talk further about it. Just leave a comment below, or leave any insight that you have additional to this. If you like the content of this video, again, share it. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're on YouTube. If you want to receive more content like this on Facebook, follow our page. And again, you'll be notified anytime videos are uploaded. Let's continue to find sexual wholeness, purity, and satisfaction. God bless you.